Guys, welcome back to another episode of Android application development tutorial with Android Studio. In this episode we are going to learn about how to display a dialog fragment in your Android application. So if you use the dialog fragment to select date or time, then the user can insert the date or time in correct format. And the recommended way of displaying a time picker or date picker is by using the dialog fragment. So if you're using the dialog fragment to display the date picker or time picker, the dialog fragment will automatically handle the lifecycle methods. Also, you can apply different layout configurations for the dialog. So here in this episode I am going to show you how to create a time picker using dialog fragment. And one more thing, the dialog fragment is available from Android version 3.0 and above. And if your Android application, if the minimum required SDK version of your Android application is below 3.0, then you have to use the Android supporting libraries to use the dialog fragment. Or if your application minimum required SDK version is 3.0, then you can use the Android platform dialog fragment instead of the supporting libraries. So here I am going to show you how to display a time picker using dialog fragment. And here I'm going to use the Android supporting libraries. That means here I'm going to create an application that will support Android version 3.0 and lower. So I have to use the Android supporting libraries to use the dialog fragment. So start a new project in Android Studio and make sure that your application minimum SDK version is lower than 3.0. So the first thing we have to download the supporting libraries for the Android version 3.0 and below. So open up the SDK manager, open your Android SDK manager. Okay, now find out the extras folder. Yeah, you can find it at the bottom of the Android SDK manager. Expand the extras folder, and in that folder you can see the Android support library. If you're using Eclipse, you have to download Android support library, and if you're using Android Studio, instead of support library you can download Android support repository. So here I use the Android Studio, so here I installed Android support repository, so that is enough. So now I have the Android support libraries. So now come back to the project. Now you have to add this Android support libraries to your application. So if you're working with Android Studio, go to the Gradle script and open up the build.gradle file. Okay, and find out this section called dependencies. Here you need to add something called here you need to add the support library. So here I am going to add the Android app compact v7 support library. So I copy this one. You can get this from the Android developer website. So here I am going to use that one. Okay, so this support library is available from target SDK version 18, so we have to change this into 18. Also the minimum SDK version needed is 7. Okay, now you have to sync the Gradle file because we make some changes on the Gradle file, so we have to sync it now. So click this option, sync now. Okay, now the Gradle file is synced successfully. Now I am going to create the time picker using the dialog fragment. So for working with the time picker, here I am going to create a new Java class. So here I am going to use this Java class for displaying the time picker dialog. I name the class as dialog handler. Okay, so here I am going to extend this class using dialog fragment make sure that you use the dialog fragment available with the Android supporting libraries. If your application support Android version 3.0 and lower, then you have to use the dialog fragment from the support library. So here is the support library, Android support.v4. Okay, now you have to override a method called onCreateDialog. In this dialog, you have to create the time picker dialog. And for handling the click events of the time picker, here I am going to create another Java class. The purpose of this Java class is to handle the click events of the time picker. So right click the package and new Java class. I name the class as time settings. Click OK. Now I have another Java class called time settings. The purpose of this Java class is to handle the click events of the time picker. Okay, now go to dialog handler. So here we have to create the time picker. So the first thing, we have to create an object of calendar. The purpose of this object is to get the current time and date, current hour and minute of the system, that means the Android device. So create an object of calendar. I name it as calendar, equal to calendar.use this method get instance. Okay, now we have to get the current hour. So create an integer variable hour equal to calendar dot call the get method and specify the variable. So calendar dot hour of the day. Okay, now we have to get the minute. So int minute equal to calendar dot call that method get method again, and here it is minute of the day. Calendar dot minute. Okay, now we can create the time picker dialog. So here I am going to create the time picker dialog. Create an object of time picker dialog. I name it as dialog. Okay, so before going to create the time picker dialog, we have to create an object of this class called time settings, because the time settings class will handle the click events of the time picker dialog. So we have to add something on the time settings. Here I am going to implement time picker dialog dot, there is a interface called on time set listener. Okay, here you need to override some method, implement methods on time set. Click OK. So whenever user set the time on the time picker, this method will invoke. On time set method will invoke. It has argument like time picker view and hour of the day and minute. Okay, so whenever user set the time using the time picker, this method will invoke. So now go back to dialog handler. Okay, one more thing, here we need an object of context. The purpose of the context object is, here I need to display a toast. Whenever user set the time, I have to display the selected time using a toast. So for displaying a toast, I need an object of context. That's why I create an object of context here. So for initializing this object, I have to create a constructor. So I create a constructor public time settings, and I need an argument of context here. Okay, now I am going to initialize this context object, this dot context equal to context. Okay, now go back to the dialog handler. Here we need an object of time settings. So here I am going to create an object of time settings. Before going to create the time picker dialog. So time settings, I name it as time settings equal to new time settings, and you have to pass a context. So I call the get activity method. Okay, now we can create the time picker dialog. So dialog equal to new time picker dialog. So the first argument you need to pass is the context object, so I call the get activity method. The second one is the object of the class that will handle the click events of the time picker. So if you handle the click events of this time picker on this class, you can pass this. So in this case, I handle the click events on another class called time settings, so I have to pass the object of that class. So here the object name is time settings. Now the third argument, you have to pass the hour, so I pass the variable hour. Now you have to pass the minute, and the final argument is the time format, whether it is 24-hour, 12-hour or 24-hour format. So I call the date format, this one date format dot, call this method is 24-hour format, and call the context object get activity. Okay, now we have a time picker dialog. So now we have to return this time picker dialog. So return dialog. Okay, so whenever user set the time using this dialog, we have to make something on the time setting. So whenever user select the user set time, this method will invoke. On time set, this method will invoke. So here I am going to display a toast dot make text. First pass the context object. Now display a message. Selected time is, first display the hour. So here the variable is hour of the day. Now display minute. And display the minute. Okay, finally specify the length, duration of the toast. I make it as long. Now call the show method. Okay, so now we have a dialog, time picker dialog, and now we have to display this dialog. So for displaying this dialog, I need a button on the activity main.xml file. So here I am going to add a button. Go to the XML version, change the text into show dialog. Also add an on-click method for this button and throw it on-click show dialog. Now we have to define this method on the main activity.java file. So go to the main activity.java file and define that method public void show dialog. Don't forget to add a view argument here. Okay, so now we have to create an object of dialog handler. This class will actually create the dialog, so we need an object of dialog handler. So dialog handler equal to new dialog handler. Okay, so for now here my minimum required SDK version is lower than 3.0, so I have to change this one into fragment activity. You have to use this class called fragment activity, which is available on the Android support library. So use that one. Okay, now you have to call the show method to display the dialog handler dot show. First you have to pass the supported fragment manager, so use this method get support fragment manager. And second argument, you have to use a unique tag for your dialog, so I specify it as time picker. Okay, now we complete all the coding. Now we can check the application. So now I am going to run the application, so click the run button. Okay, now we have the application available on the virtual device. So here now the time available on the virtual device is 11:30. So now I am going to click the show dialog button. So now here we have a time picker. So now the time is set into 11:30, that is the current time of the virtual device. And now here I am going to make a selection. I change the time into 10:30 p.m. 10:30 p.m. and click done button. Now selected time is 24 minutes, 24 hour and 30 minutes. Okay, I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.